Hey, stop again. Stop again.
How's it going? My name's Lee.
And they were living, and they were pioneers.
Well, this is super exciting. This is the first where we have Tucker Gott here because Travis Burns was kind enough to come all of the way from Lake Wales, Florida, to hang out and to record a podcast episode. And we're going to start this episode off by acknowledging that Travis is severely sleep deprived because you had one hell of an experience, trying to get to El Paso. You were supposed to be here yesterday. What the hell?
We had a mechanical out of Atlanta, and the APU wasn't working.
What is the APU?
So the APU is that little jet engine in the back of the airplane that doesn't make thrust, but it just makes air conditioning and provides backup power for the airplane. Normally, you don't need it to fly. Normally, as soon as you take off, they shut it down. So the pilot tried to get a deferment so they could get it fixed in Atlanta, and I guess that wasn't granted. Yeah. So we had a couple-hour delay.
The APU creates the air conditioning, but you didn't need that. You're from Florida.
No, we didn't need that.
You can handle the heat.
I wasn't going to make my connection. It was pretty obvious. So I got off the plane. I was going to rebook for today to come back out again so I could sleep in my own bed last night. And captain came off the plane and he said, "Hey, we got it fixed. We're going to go." And I looked at the captain and I said, "So you're going to be wheels up in 20 minutes? He's like, yeah, I think we can." So I got back on the plane and they, people kind of messed it up. They didn't get on the plane in time. And then when they got on the plane, they shut the door and they pulled the jetway back. And then somebody decided they wanted off the plane. And then they had to find a jetway operator. And it was kind of hilarious because everybody on the airplane was like, boo, boo. And this poor guy standing there by the door and everybody's glaring at him and booing. It was like this mob scene. And then he's like, "Well, I've been on the customer support with Delta for an hour and they just told me I'm not going to make my connection." Then people start screaming, "Look, now none of us are going to make our connections, asshole." So they finally got the jetway to the door and they let him off, and then the whole plane cheered.
Clap. Get out of here.
I kind of felt a little bad for the guy, but not really. And so anyway, I just got to spend a night in a hotel in Atlanta last night.
But you didn't really get much sleep, huh?
No. Yeah, I think the garbage truck pulled up to my window about every 20 minutes. With that beep.
Yeah. We had talked about the potential for you to fly your Cessna 172.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
And so one of the coolest things that I love about Travis is that he is a real pilot, right?
Come on, we're all real pilots.
Yeah.
Depends who you ask.
I mean, yeah, I know there's a certain people.
Yeah. What do you think, Tucker?
I say we're real pilots. I think the FAA would agree, right?
That's the likable answer, sure.
We're real ultralight vehicle operators.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they actually use the word pilot in 103. So
do they?
I'm pretty sure.
Do they?
I want to say that.
So they're there, right here, guys. Right here.
That's what I'm.
We need to find
Someone, Jamie, pull that off.
We are pilots. No, that's funny. But no, all jokes aside, you were a military pilot. Mm-hmm. You are a licensed pilot by the FAA.
Yes.
And so are you, Tucker, right?
Technically, just not current.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, but you got it. You got your pilot's license.
Super uncurrent. Super.
Yeah. How old were you when you got your pilot's license?
I sold it at 16 and then got my license at 17.
Holy cow. How old were you when you first flew an airplane with the instructor?
Like 15.
Yeah.
I started training and doing flight lessons.
Did you beat him to that? Were you younger?
No, I was actually the exact same age. I was 15.
Really? Yeah. And how did you get into flying?
I don't know. I just always wanted to do it. When I was 12, I joined the Civil Air Patrol. Sounds kind of dorky, but it was kind of fun. I actually got to do some really cool stuff with them. And I got a scholarship to get my through solo for free through the organization.
Oh, damn.
And,
how does that work?
I just applied and I somehow won. But
so not everybody, just because you joined the Civil Air Patrol.
I just applied and I got it, and I got to do some cool stuff. Like I remember I got to fly in the back of a KC-135 and refuel F-4 Phantoms at night.
How?
And lay down next to the refueling
This was
operator.
all through the Civil Air Patrol.
Yeah, as a kid. So actually, it was a really cool organization for I was because I was in the Boy Scouts at the time. And I was like, oh, this is way cooler. I get to do stuff.
Were you always just all into airplanes, or?
I was the kid that had like the astronaut posters and the space shuttle
Yeah.
posters on the wall, and I
Yeah.
was the dork. Top Gun generation, you know.
Yeah, because you had the Top Gun poster. I remember when we recorded the podcast, it was like it was an image of Tom Cruise without the airplanes with his shirt off.
No.
Oh, okay, never mind. He saw it. He saw it. I saw it. We all saw it.
Tucker.
You joined the Civil Air Patrol. You ended up getting your pilot's license because they funded it? all
No,
the way?
actually, I didn't. I just got through solo, and then they didn't fund past that. So
Yeah.
I joined the Coast Guard at 17, and hopefully on the path to
Right.
become a pilot, and went through year prep school, 4 years of academy. They make everybody go 2 years at sea.
Yeah.
And then you can compete to see if you want to fly.
Oh, I thought you had joined the Coast Guard as a pilot.
No.
What did you join as?
An E1.
Yeah, but how does it work? Because in the Army, you know what job title you're like. I joined originally because I wanted to be a helicopter pilot.
Well,
I couldn't get.
I joined as I went through the Coast Guard Academy.
Yeah.
So I went to the Coast Guard Academy on a path to get a commission upon graduation, upon which everybody has to spend 2 years at sea at that time.
You were an officer, no?
And then I was, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And then you could kind of path out from there.
Yeah.
After you did the academy, 2 years at sea, then you could path out. So
Right.
I was like, you go. I spent 2 years in the Coast Guard Cutter Spencer, and you had to
You said 2 years at sea.
correct.
Wait. Is that at sea or on the coast? Because it's Coast Guard. Were you a lifeguard?
Anthony, be nice.
No.
Hey, everybody
It's
calls
brotherly
us
love.
puddle pirates, but what we used to say to the Army guys and everybody else that made fun of us is, well, somebody's got to take care of your wives when you're deployed, and that would always shut them up really quickly. So,
Damn it.
yeah. So I did 2 years on a ship, a 270-foot Coast Guard cutter.
Okay.
Did grueling 8-week deployments down to the Caribbean,
Oh,
busting
I'm so sorry.
drug dealers.
Yeah.
And grueling deployments up in the Gulf of Maine, busting poor fishermen just trying to make a living.
Yeah.
And so we did that for 2 years, and then you had to pretend you had to tell your captain of the ship I love ships. Ship life for me. This is what I want to do forever. But I'm just thinking about aviation. it's just in the back of my mind because you couldn't
Right.
if you told them you wanted to be an aviator.
Right.
Yeah, you're done.
Right.
So I got his recommendation, and I did make it into Naval Flight School. I left there, went to Naval Flight School.
Damn, first go. You
First
got
go, and
it. You applied for it and you got it.
yeah.
Damn, dude. That's super freaking cool.
And then, so 18 months in Naval Flight School, and then flew 4 tours in the Coast Guard
Yeah.
in a row before I retired.
So what sort of aircraft were you flying? What did you start out in the Air Force or the Air Force, the Coast Guard?
Well, so post training, my first Coast Guard aircraft was the we call it the HU-25 Falcon. It's a Falcon jet. It's a Dassault Falcon 20 twin engine, super mid-sized twin engine jet. Basically,
Assault.
Dassault. They're
Dassault.
it's a French company. They make the Rafale fighter, Mirage.
Yeah. Okay.
They also
What
make-
mission did that serve? That aircraft?
It was multi-mission. So we had a drop hatch. It was modified. It had a lot of modifications. So we had a drop hatch that opened up. So you had a big hole in the floor, so you could drop dewatering pumps and life rafts and food. So you could do search and rescue. Go out there at night. Somebody's sinking. Drop them a raft. Drop them a dewatering pump. Drop them food. Whatever.
Did you ever end up doing
Oh,
these
yeah,
sorts of
yeah,
things?
yeah.
Can you
Yeah,
give me
for
an
sure.
example of a story of one of your first missions that got you all hot and bothered?
Yeah, sure.
There are all these babes on the beach, and I just kept flying circles past.
I don't
them.
know. I can tell you my not my first mission, but one that I really was kind of proud of was off the coast of Louisiana. A helicopter had gone down.
Yeah.
And they gave us a track line. They had no idea. It was a 400-mile track line.
Yeah.
Somewhere along this track line, this offshore helicopter
So the
went
track
down.
line is just something you're following this.
Well,
path.
that was their path out to an offshore rig
Uh-huh.
from Houma, Louisiana to an offshore rig. And so it was your chances of finding them, and it's at night, are super, super slim. And you don't even know if they were on the track line on the way out. And plus having a track line that big and it's dark
Yeah.
out. But we have night vision, and at least the guys in back had night vision.
Right.
And they saw a guy they saw these lights that didn't make any sense. Now there's thousands of lights. The Gulf of America It looks like a city at night. Like, I swear to God, you get out there and it looks like the whole thing's a city because there's just thousands of oil rigs there everywhere, and they're all super well lit. But they found a light that didn't seem to fit in. So we circled around. We called the helicopter. We're like, hey, we don't think this is these guys, but there's like some green.
Right.
They had those little Cylune light sticks.
Yeah,
That's what the guys were seeing at night. A couple of those.
Right.
From a Falcon jet doing, 200 and something knots at
What altitude?
500 feet.
500 feet.
And it was them. So they got them all out of the water.
So once you identified them, you were able to give like coordinates to a boat that would go pick them up, or
we actually got it to a helicopter.
Helicopter,
came
okay.
and picked them up. Took them 2 trips. But
did you ever get to meet the guys?
no.
No. Huh.
Every now and then you get we have a rescue, and I never really got to meet the people.
Yeah.
The one thing about being a helicopter pilot is they get to meet the people.
Right.
The fixed wing guys, we just hey, here's some food and water, and here's a
You're
raft.
welcome. You'll never.
We'll call in the guys that can really save you, and we're going to go home and eat dinner.
Helicopter guys are the heroes.
Yeah,
you guys can get no credit.
Heroes. We're just up there eating our box lunches and finding them. But no, we get a letter or a card or something like that.
That's
from a
awesome
family
that
member.
you had
so
that
that was
good
kinda
story.
cool.
Are there any stories where things didn't work out so well?
Sure. I can't think of a specific one, but there's plenty of times where
Like you've come across
where we
bodies
just
in the
didn't-
water. I'm
no,
sure
no.
that's
Sure,
that's
yeah,
really tough.
absolutely.
Tucker had started to tell me a story. I was like, save it for the podcast.
Did I tell you about this
I
in
heard.
Florida?
I think you did.
Yeah.
Well, I
found
haven't.
about
Yeah.
it.
So I mean, I haven't really talked about this online just because I thought out of respect,
Yeah.
but I don't know. It's a sad thing, but it's been almost a year.
Yeah,
and
okay.
it's whatever.
Yeah.
But basically I was paramotoring from my house. There's a little grass strip I can take off from.
In New Jersey.
No, out in Arizona.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this was
Oh
after I
man,
moved.
this was. Oh, you
Yeah.
said a year ago.
Yeah, so I'm basically on the edge of the desert where I live.
Yeah.
So I took off, and there's nothing really interesting to fly over, but
Right.
I'm just flying over the desert. I was about to come back and land, but the sun was setting and it was really pretty. And I was like, I'm just gonna go venture off and enjoy the sunset for 10 more minutes.
Right.
And I head out into the desert and I see a Jeep out in the middle of nowhere, a couple miles away from the edge of town.
Yeah.
And the headlights are on. And I'm like, oh, cool. People love it when you go fly past them. So I go to fly past this guy, maybe about 30 feet high and 30 feet away, and make an arc around the front of the Jeep. And the headlights are on, the driver's side door is open, and I see a guy in the driver's seat, and he doesn't look well.
Oh no.
And first, you go past and you have just a couple second window where you can see in the vehicle.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that didn't look right. So I make another circle. And that time, knowing what I was looking for, I could see the guy was covered in blood.
Oh no.
And there was a rifle on the ground next to
Oh
him.
my gosh.
And I was in shock.
You could identify this while flying?
Yeah. I mean, it was a quick glimpse. And I'm glad, I discovered this while flying and not up close and personal.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
when you're
yeah.
in the air, it's a
Yeah.
little disconnected and you're just zooming past.
Right.
So I was in disbelief. And then I made a third loop around and just confirmed. I was like, yeah, this is exactly what I think it is.
Yeah.
So I got a little altitude. I dropped a pin on Google Maps of where he was at. And from a higher perspective, I took a photo of where the trails came in from town out to where he was at. And luckily I was pretty close to where I took off from. So I just zoomed back and I called 911. I was like, I don't know who else to call about this. So they connected a sheriff to me. I sent out the photos and the GPS pin, and they went out and found him.
Yeah.
And they ended up calling me later and just confirmed that it was what I described. And they wanted some information to make sure I wasn't involved. I didn't tamper with anything. And I had my GoPro rolling start to finish. So I just sent them all the footage. I was like, this is exactly what happened. And I never heard anything else. So my assumption is it was a suicide and he just drove out into the middle of the desert.
Yeah. You said the rifle was right beside him.
But I mean, it could have been
staged.
Yeah, it could have been a homicide, a drug thing. Who knows?
Yeah.
Most likely, I think it was a suicide. But it was just one of those weird. It's probably the weirdest thing I've seen from a paramotor.
Right.
Discovered.
Did it have any sort of effect?
I mean, it was just weird. It was shocking, and I guess it was weird that it was close to home. I was flying from my house, and if you drew a line, it was maybe 5 miles from my house.
Yeah.
So if it was something criminal, it made me feel a little uneasy. But it was honestly just weird.
I can't imagine. I mean, I can't imagine. I've seen somebody who has passed away, who had passed away, and I was in the air, and it's a crappy feeling for sure.
Yeah.
So if that wasn't heavy enough,
I mean, you want the story. It was a
All right.
yay!
got a good story to lighten the mood.
No, okay. To bring things back to your flying history, Travis. So you flew. What was the name of that aircraft that you flew?
That was the HE-25 Falcon jet, and I also flew the HC-144 Ocean Sentry, which is a twin engine, like a scaled down C-130.
Right.
So I kind of split my.
And what kind of missions were you doing in that aircraft?
70% of what we did was counter narcotic and counter migrant reconnaissance or interdiction type work. I mean, I had some really weird ones. I flew 79 Pelicans from the Deepwater Horizon oil spill.
you flew an aircraft full of Pelicans?
79 Pelicans, and they were each one was in a dog crate, like an individual dog crate.
Did you have to give them like the safety briefing over the speaker?
Dude.
All right, Pelicans, listen up here. This is your captain speaking.
The smell.
Yeah.
You know what pelicans eat?
No.
They
What do pelicans eat?
fish.
Oh.
And then they poop. And then you're in 79 pelicans in an aircraft pooping the smell of fish.
Smell pretty shitty.
Dead fish.
Yeah, it's not really.
It's really awful. And then I actually flew a dolphin one time
Oh, man.
down to Key West.
You have an interesting list of clients.
It was like in this giant like container. It was a full size dolphin.
Right.
And then we had like 1,000 gallons of water in the container, but no top, and the trainer was in the container with it to keep it calm.
Right.
And we're like the most gentle takeoff ever.
I know.
Like doing everything. So I didn't want the water to slosh out, and I didn't want the dolphin to freak out and have water going over the airplane. You know? It was kind of funny.
Dolphins out.
But it was kind of cool.
Help.
We got some lots of just kind of unique missions, and stuff like, especially with things like Deepwater Horizon.
What's Deepwater Horizon?
Deepwater Horizon was that massive oil spill that took place in the Gulf of Mexico back in 2010.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Hurricane Katrina?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Come on, Travis.
Well, they made a movie about Deepwater Horizon.
We need to get him a microphone. Travis was in the Coast Guard for 20 years, right?
23.
23 years. And you said at the very last flight they did the water over the top. That must have been a powerful moment.
Yeah, it was really cool. I mean, I had a super lucky, blessed career in a way that I flew 4 tours in a row, did some really fun, cool stuff.
Yeah.
And my last day, I got to fly, and I got to fly over my family and everybody, down low, and come back around, land, do the little thing with the fire hydrants, and jump out of the back of the airplane and have a 10-minute retirement ceremony, and walk away. I haven't been back on a military base since.
So you spent a lot of time in aviation. Has anybody ever passed away in fixed wing, rotary wing?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
Anybody close to you? I'm like fucking this up by just going back to it. No, I mean,
there we go.
what is going on with Anthony?
No. I mean, of course.
Well, because you said about 23 amazing years, but I'm sure that it's,
of course we had what we call Class A mishaps where people died, people I knew. I did have someone that I was very close to that did pass away in an aviation mishap. It was he was somebody who lived in my house for 3 months, and he was a great friend for a number of years.
Yeah.
And he was a C-130 aircraft commander flying a mission off the coast, a search and rescue mission off the coast of California, Southern California at night. And a group of 2 Marine Corps Apache helicopters were also out in the area.
Oh, no.
Lights out on goggles. And at the time, our C-130 guys didn't have night vision, so they couldn't see it. And the investigation showed that the Marine Corps guys shouldn't have been out there. But either way, not to place fault, but there was a midair collision between the C-130 and one of the Apache helicopters at night over the southern coast, and my friend was the aircraft commander. So, everybody was lost on both aircraft.
Yeah. But it's still something that's ultimately absolutely worth it. Like, some people just have the bug to fly. We've got Ethan here behind the camera. Do you think that you could confidently tell somebody that beyond a reasonable doubt they can do this safely if they make good choices? Yeah,
it's a great question, and it's harder to answer that question from the person's spouse or significant other, and I get that too.
Yeah. Have you ended up speaking with spouses about this?
Yeah. It's very awkward and uncomfortable because, of course, I can't guarantee anything.
Right.
And I have to be honest about it.
Right.
When I do an in-brief for the new class, and this is going to sound crass, but I say, it's sort of a joke, but I say safety's third here. And then I wait for the reaction. And I say, no, but seriously, I mean, safety for all of us is extremely important. And, you know, you guys, even though you're new at this and you've never done it before, like something that doesn't seem right to you, we might have missed it. Let us know, like, please, like, we're not perfect. We can miss things. But at the same time, if safety was first, you wouldn't have come out of your house today.
Yeah.
And we can't live life as safety first. There are risks, but the most wonderful thing is that there's lots of ways to mitigate it.
Right.
Like
right.
lots of ways to mitigate it with good equipment and good decisions and flying in good conditions and having mentors is a huge one.
Yeah.
And especially mentors, because that's the one in paramotoring that we all see is fairly not common, but if you look at the accidents that I've looked at over the last 15 years, one of the most common ones is the 3 to 6 month pilot, overconfidence, and that's why having a mentor that can be like, hey, I saw what you did there, back off. Like stop,
Yeah.
or go work with somebody and get some training before you try and do that kind of stuff.
Right.
Because,
So what happens if your mentor goes all out and crashes? Do you follow him? That's my boy right there.
I have one piece of advice. If you keep it below 47 miles per hour, you're going to be fine.
46 minutes.
46.5.
I bet
golden.
at 53. A free ride 15 full bar.
No.
I get that question from spouses and significant
Yeah.
others. I mean, I'm honest about it, but I also say, look at me. I've been doing this for 15 years. I still have all my fingers, all my toes, and I'm still walking.
You know, the number one cause of injury in paramotoring is propeller. Easily avoidable for the most part, right?
Definitely easily avoidable for sure.
Right. But people get complacent sometimes. And obviously there are individuals who are very mindful that this sport can be dangerous just like anything else. You know, I've heard individuals who say, you shouldn't compare it to driving a car. Do you think that that's a fair comparison to say that, you know, in life that paramotoring is equivalent to driving a car?
Well, people are like, okay, we drive a car because we have to drive a car.
Yeah.
We don't do it for fun, right? Paramotoring is something that we do for recreation and pleasure. So there's a huge difference right there from the start.
Yeah.
From a risk standpoint, I don't know. I mean, I think paramotoring is probably more risky than driving a car.
Right.
Would you agree?
Yeah, I have an interesting thought on it. I agree with everything you said. Like, it's impossible to mitigate the risk. But what I thought about recently of like, when you talk about risk, okay, break it down into two categories: risk of dying and risk of getting injured.
Right.
I feel like in paramotoring, I think it's entirely possible to mitigate the risk of dying and to be able to do it till you're 80 and not die.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if it's possible to mitigate the risk of getting injured just statistically.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can't mitigate the risk 100%. You could get shot by a laser or something crazy could happen like that.
Yeah.
But
you're at a higher likelihood of like breaking your ankle or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. We see that, especially foot launchers.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
Pulling
yeah.
a muscle, breaking an ankle, or twisting a bone.
Yeah.
knock on wood, I haven't been injured yet, but it's like statistically, if I look at my peers, unfortunately, you're an example of someone that's been injured in paramotoring.
Right.
It's like most of the people I know have hurt themselves along the road somewhere.
But you can't tell anymore.
Yes.
You can't.
Get the elbow covered.
As long as the
Wearing,
jacket's
like,
on.
layers.
I think looking at like base jumping, I definitely don't think you can do it indefinitely without getting injured.
Right.
I think there's too many uncontrolled variables in base jumping.
Okay.
And I would start to argue that you can't do it forever without dying either.
Sure.
I think there's a higher statistical likelihood of that happening. But in paramotoring, I feel like I would say you can do it forever without dying if you take the right precautions.
I wanted to ask you about this because you're an individual who has so much exposure, 1.6 million subscribers, right? And you have hundreds of thousands of comments. in my comment section, I find myself in this position where it's tough because I think a lot of the new subscribers that I have found their way to my channel because of the how viral the crash video was. Within the paramotor community, it's overwhelmingly in support of Anthony going back to flying, which is totally what I want to do. Like, I absolutely want to fly. I think that my family knows that I've learned how to make better choices while flying. I hope. But still, when I mention this sort of thing, I am attacked. Like, I'm inconsiderate. And the assumption is that accepting any amount of risk is me being selfish. How would you respond to that if you were in my shoes, wanting to get back to flying?
Yeah. I mean, primarily those comments are coming from the people that really they're not involved in any high risk activity, right?
Right.
They don't really understand any of it. So I can kind of empathize with their perspective because they just they don't do anything that's risky. They are kind of like safety's number one. Like, they're just going to drive their car and that's it.
Yeah.
So I just think that they wouldn't really understand. And that's, like you said, the people that Paramotor, they're in support of it. They get it. They know that, like, you can make better decisions. You can choose different gliders. You can choose how you fly, and you can keep that risk under control.
I think ultimately that's what it boils down to. However, that being said, had I known then what I know now, like, yeah, I could check the lines better. And I think that was one of the big learning lessons like one of the takeaways is that a lot of people did look more closely.
Yeah.
So I think in a way, just like in aviation, people learn from incidents.
Aviation procedures have been written in blood.
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah.
And you hear people talking online about doing Vela checks now.
Yeah. Wild.
I like it.
Is that funny to you?
Very.
I mean, after my crash, there were a lot of people who like would flying different gliders. It didn't make a difference. They were flying whatever glider that they already owned, and they were finding similar things, like one of the lines being a little bit taut just because of tension knot or whatever was pulling on the line, and they were able to catch it because it drew the attention to something that maybe the community wasn't as aware of.
No, nobody was doing it, and me myself included. Like, and I probably before your incident would have gone up there, and unless I felt something weird, I wouldn't have done that before I went to full bar.
Right.
Now I'm going to do a Vela check.
Right.
you know, but
yeah,
it's crazy. It's like back in like Tucker was around then, like 2012 to 2016, somewhere in there, like water deaths were like the huge one. That's where everybody was getting into trouble was water. They weren't treating water with respect.
Right.
And it, because of that, now there's much more awareness. People, if they are around water, they're using flotation, they're mitigating that type of flying. And now we don't really ever hear about it.
Yeah, totally. That used to be the number one. And now I think the current trend, like you were saying, is the ground starts. Prop strikes.
Not for deaths, but it is.
Yeah, injuries.
I think prop strikes have always been like the number one cause of injury. But I think what happened was it went from the number one cause of death, and this was in Jeff Gowen's book as well, saying that water landings were the number one cause of death, but then it was low acro, right? I think for even today, I'm surprised there's not as many fatalities in the world of paramotoring. Considering by the numbers, there's not like a really large percentage of fatalities. I think it's taken out of proportion to some extent. But after I learned how to fly, when I was taught that the number one cause of death was water landings, there were like 2 or 3 deaths one year, and they were all hooking it into the ground, trying to do some wing overs, that aggressive flying style, and then miscalculation.
Right.
If I got back into flying paramotors, I don't believe that I would. I don't think I would use speed bar again. That's not me saying like I think that speed bars are dangerous. I think there's a little bit of a, what would you call it? Like a mental or something scar.
Well, you didn't use speed bar on a regular basis before.
I did.
Incident,
Well,
did you?
Not regularly. Oh, that's the point I wanted to bring up, is that had I not used speed bar, that glider actually would have been perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Even with something being wrong in the lines that, once again, wasn't related to that glider specifically, had I not gone out on speed bar, that glider could have flown around, I'm convinced, all day.
Probably, yeah.
With it not accelerated. Can you explain, either of you, when you're fully accelerated on a glider, you don't want to touch main brakes? Why?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say in a very simple sense. If you were flying around without the speed bar, your trim would be at a neutral setting the whole time, and you're safe there. Even with that tangle, even with the slight deformation, it's not making a big difference. But when you accelerate to full speed, you're changing the trim and the angle of attack of the glider to put it on the very edge of its fastest speed. And if the slightest bit of air goes on top of the wing and changes the angle of attack any more negative, that's when it collapses. So you're riding this fine line of like the maximum speed, and you can't pull brake at that point because you're going to deform the profile of the wing. And essentially what your deformation was doing was pulling brake.
Right.
And you're not allowed to do that. Right. So it just distorted the wing at that maximum negative angle of attack that caused it to collapse.
Yeah, interesting. A lot of the people were talking about maybe you saw in the comments about the cell phone being in my hand. You commented on it in your video as well. At the end of the day, do you think that that would have necessarily made a difference? Or do you think that those are just best practices?
I think, if you want the right answer, the technical right answer, you want to have the brakes like ready, in a position to fly it away. In reality, would that have saved you to not have the phone? No, I think it would have been the same outcome. I think if you were at a higher altitude with a reserve, that's the other factor of like risk mitigation of like one, choosing to use speed bar increases risk. Right. And then the altitude and the reserve selection, I think is the bigger thing. The cell phone, I don't think would have made any difference. And I've done the same exact thing with testing the Cougar and one hand over here. Like, I get it. It's not the best practice per se, but is it going to make a difference?
Well, I mean,
not really.
It's not just you testing the Cougar. It's like a lot of people, when they get into paramotoring, you've taken photos flying, huh? Yeah.
Every time I fly.
Every freaking time.
With my cell phone.
Hey, Lee, have you ever taken a photo while flying?
I don't fly.
Denial.
I float. Yeah, I think everybody who I've ever known has taken a photo at some point. Yeah. And so the truth is during that flight, I only pulled my phone out to get that, just to check the speed. I was curious to see what my airspeed was. Yeah. And, in the manual, maybe either of you can elaborate on this. It says, don't use main brakes, use tip steering. Mm-hmm. So you're fully accelerated, glider takes a collapse. You're not supposed to take the main brakes. Mm-hmm. I think step number one is to try and get the trims in and release speed bar so that then the glider doesn't just keep recollapsing. If it's fully accelerated, right, you touching main brakes will induce a collapse. Like that's what we just spoke about. So there's a lot of people who are quick to say, well, you should have done this. And it's like, but you shouldn't do that based off of the information. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's where I think there's a bit of nuance. And to be honest, I don't know the right answer. I feel like coming from your accident, there's a really big lesson as well in the nuance of gliders and how they're trimmed. Because obviously at full speed, you're not allowed to touch main brake. But there's two different categories of gliders. And one is when you are trimmed out fully, you can use the main brake. Others, which was your glider, trimmed fully out, you're not allowed to touch main brake. So in the instance of a glider that you can use brakes while trimmed out, the nice part is if you're on bar and trimmed out full speed, take a full collapse, you can dump bar immediately. Now you're back in a configuration where you can use main brake.
Right.
So technically that's safer to be in that configuration. But on the glider you are on, you're still, after you dump bar, which you can do instantaneously, you're still not allowed to use main brake. And that's where it gets to the point of, I really don't know what the first step should be. Should it be trying to pull your trims in? Because that's going to take time to find them. Should you have your hands on the trims? Should you just try your best to stab brake and get it flying, even though you might induce another collapse?
Yeah.
I don't know, but I do know that in those scenarios of flying a glider fully trimmed out that you're not allowed to use main brake, which is like my Viper XC and the Viper 6.
Yeah.
Those I'm going to treat with a lot more respect in the conditions I choose to fly in that configuration and the altitude I choose to fly, because I know I'm in a vulnerable situation that if something does happen, I have an additional step before I can start flying.
Okay.
So I think that brought to light that whole question
Yeah.
of what do you actually do?
Maybe if I did have my hands on main brakes, I could have just caught the surge or somehow prevented it. I mean, this is a good point to mention that going to an SIV has benefits.
It's an interesting point because, glider manufacturers, there isn't like as far as I can tell, there isn't like a test necessarily that's based on, okay, at this point, don't use main brakes. At this point, you can. There's not, it's sort of up to the manufacturer to write their manual and how conservative they want to be with that particular glider.
Yeah.
And obviously, when you get into these advanced gliders, things like, load ranges, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
There's no EN testing. And I know for a fact that the glider has been tested at fully accelerated and using main brakes, and it would not, and it did not collapse. I'm sure they weren't like honking on full brake, but as a user, all when you get the book is, past don't use brakes past trim 6.
Sure.
And that's what you should follow. But then it does, I see what you're saying, lead to the question like, oh, if this were to happen to me, what would I do? I mean, I guess I know enough for me personally that I would, if I'd come on, I'd let go of the bar, and if the wing's in front of me, I'm going to grab brakes and try and get it back up overhead. But that's based on my experience and my knowledge of how this glider has been tested.
Does knowing the fact that if I had never touched the speed bar in combination with being fully accelerated on the trims, does any part of that deter you from wanting to be fully accelerated? The reason I ask is, how much does an individual gain in reward versus the potential risk that is created? I suppose the analogy I use sometimes is that a glider, a paraglider, it kind of becomes like a thoroughbred racehorse when it's fully accelerated. It's more temperamental.
Right.
And when it's not, and you're just, chill flying like Ethan over here plans on doing, that you can be pretty negligent, not that you should, and get away with a lot. These gliders are really resilient, more than my viewers probably understand.
Yeah.
So knowing that there's that increased risk by being fully accelerated, is it still something that you feel like it's worth it?
It depends. The thing is, like, flying an a more advanced glider fully accelerated. I mean, if we're going to compare it for the person like Ethan who doesn't paramotor yet, but it's like, okay, someone's got their 500 enduro motorcycle, and then they've got the Turbo Busa. There's
right.
Flying these advanced gliders fully accelerated is like flying the Turbo Busa on the racetrack and trying to get it as fast as you can go.
Right.
I mean, what if the tire could blow? I mean, there's obviously you're introducing all kinds of risk versus not flying with the speed bar engaged. So I personally have not used speed bar in probably 2.5 years.
Right.
And then because I just don't have a need for it. But if I was in a competitive environment like we had recently, or doing like an Icarus like Tucker did, then that would probably create a reason to use bar.
Right.
In that scenario.
You are one of the biggest instructors in the country, in the world, because the United States, you're a fantastic. Honestly,
I thought that was Dell. I watched those videos. It was Dell. He said it himself, right? Yeah. Am I wrong?
He's the best
Dell
in the world.
Shanti. That's where you want to go.
You got that, Ethan? You're a friend of mine.
Yeah.
Do you think that if my wife and family is supportive of it, that it's still irresponsible of me if I have like a safe plan?
No, of course not.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Not even close. No, I think it's awesome. I think it's amazing. It's something that you're passionate about.
Right.
You've got to, like you said, you could go fly that glider today
Yeah.
and go full bar with your phone out
Right.
at 100 feet without a reserve, and 999 out of 1,000, nothing bad is going to happen.
Right.
I don't know. It's pretty windy.
Yeah. It's, hello, Travis.
As long-
It's windy out today.
As long as you do a Vela check.
Do the Vela check. I mean, yeah, no, seriously. As
You
long
almost
as
sound like a Russian.
But
yeah,
Anthony Belichick.
that's
Vela check.
hard for you because you're out there publicly, so you're getting opinions from all kinds of people,
Right.
and they're good intentioned opinions, of course they are.
Right. Right.
But I think Tucker said it earlier, that you're getting opinions of people that maybe are not involved in
Yeah.
higher risk activities.
Right.
And safety is first. And I'd say, fortunately for us, we do. We're passionate about it. We love it. It fires us up. It makes life worth living. It's an amazing thing that we do, paramotoring. It's something that hasn't gotten old for me in 15 years yet, and it's still just like I get giddy when I go and fly. It's
Right.
absolutely unbelievable.
Right.
And I couldn't imagine giving it up.
Yeah. And I don't want to imagine giving it up. I love it.